But at its core, humanists, Marxists, those who think that science teaches us liberal values, all that they are doing is grappling around for some way, some prop, some way in which they can justify clinging on to Christian morality without Christian belief.
But isn't that scrabbling around necessary if you decide that you quite like Christian morality? You think that Jesus and Paul were extraordinary and transformative philosophers, thinkers, but you don't believe that Jesus was a deity?
Of course. If you lose your faith, then you have to find some other way of, but you want to keep hold of the package, then you have to find some other way. But the problem is that, as we know from the history of the 20th century, that actually if you get rid of Christian belief, then it becomes quite easy to get rid of the Christian values as well. And of course, the philosopher who famously points this out is Nietzsche. And Nietzsche's most famous parable is of the killing of God, and the person who proclaims that God is dead and that we have killed him, we humanity have killed him, at first is ignored. People don't believe him, because although God is dead, his corpse lies in the cave, its shadows still seem to move. And so Nietzsche says that after a crime of such a scale, people will continue to believe that God is dead that God is alive for many centuries, even though in fact it's corpse, it's cold, it's gone forever. And the object of this parable isn't so much believing Christians, people who continue to go to church and to believe that God exists and that Christ rose on the third day. Rather, it's the people that I've just been talking about. It's the humanists, it's the liberals, it's the socialists, it's the communists, it's the philosophers. It's people who imagine that they can cling on to Christian morality without Christian belief. And Nietzsche says that, this will go because a new order will arise and great process of convulsion. Supermen will arise who will no longer need to be bound by this morality of a murdered God. And this, of course, was hugely influential in the wake of the First World War, first on Mussolini and then on the Nazis. And Himmler says, just as Dawkins or a Marxist or anyone might say, that there's nothing special about humans. We're all just organisms. There's nothing special about humans. We're just animals like any other animal. And therefore, people who promote the idea that humans have there's anything special about humans are deluded. And that then provides the basis for the ideological justification for what he and the Nazis generally set out to do. And they set out very, very consciously to trample down two of the core Christian teachings. One, that all human beings, humanism essentially, that all human beings are created equal and have an equal dignity. And secondly, that the weak have a special status, a special hold, that the strong have a responsibility to the weak, that the powerful have a responsibility to the powerless. These are the two fundamental Christian teachings that the Nazis set themselves to repudiate with genocidal effect.
Now, I want you to listen very closely to this next part. It's really interesting. Holland provides an example of how modern secular culture still holds on to its Christian ideas by embodying the Christian archetypes of hell and Satan in Nazism.
And in the wake of the Second World War, in the wake of the Holocaust, in the wake of the elimination of those who are condemned by the Nazis as mentally or physically defective, in the wake of the murder of an entire races of people because they are assumed to be subhuman, in the post-war West, the experience of this is felt as such a shock, as such a blasphemy, that it imprints the Christian ideals that have been offended by the Nazis as ideals to be upheld that can be believed in without necessarily believing in the religion that had given them birth. And so rather than the devil, Hitler gets enshrined as the embodiment of purest evil. Rather than believe in hell, we have the image of Auschwitz. And we no longer need to articulate evil in an overtly Christian way, because we have evil with flags and swastikas and black uniforms and louse-ridden people being herded into gas chambers before us.
Is this not true? Look at the modern secular liberal person. For them, the greatest evil in the world is racism, and the embodiment of evil racism is Hitler. It's really fascinating what Holland's getting at here.
The question we face, and I think it's one that recent events have brought very much into saliency, is whether that's enough. And we increasingly see that liberals, progressives, when they're confronted by people who may not necessarily agree with liberal principles or progressive principles, what recourse do liberals or progressives have to convince people that actually all human beings are equal, that the strong, the rich do have a duty of care to the weak and to the poor? Basically, they shout Nazi. And the question has to be, what happens when people turn around and go, yeah, and?
Ooh, this is good. Do you see how the modern secular liberal assumes that the other person just automatically embraces their humanistic and therefore Christian assumptions? What happens if the world slips back into the assumptions of Romans or Aztec or social Darwinian assumptions?
Because what we lack is the theological seedbed, the cultural seedbed, the seedbed of that enormous inheritance of Christian belief and practice and ritual that has sustained these beliefs for 2,000 years. If they're gone, can these beliefs be sustained? That's the huge question. And that's the question that Nietzsche in particular asked. And it's one to which I don't know the answer.
This is truly the conundrum of our time. And what is really scary is how if we lose the principle of universal human dignity and brotherhood, how that leads us back into the tribal special interest groups competing for power, which is what we see in an increasing amount in the world today as we abandon our Christian roots. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want more content, including the podcast, go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thanks for watching.